Hello, I'm Rex Waddell, and I attend the University of Missouri St. Louis. I'm a doctoral candidate in the School of Education for a doctorate in policy and leadership. And I like to present a research proposal that I think presents some critical information that will really add to the field of education. Before I begin, I'd like to show you a slide and kind of tell you a relevant story. Let me begin by telling you that there was a professor from a leading medical school that went to visit some of his students that were volunteering in Haiti. When he got to there, he found them in the village, and the students were busy. They were passing out dose after dose of antibiotics, treating diarrhea in the kids and some of the adults in the village. Apparently, there was a well there, and the students and the parents and the adults were all suffering. Once he kind of looked around, the professor said, "Listen, to the students, you kind of got a choice to make here, some clear options. You can either continue to treat the symptoms by writing prescription after prescription and giving dose after dose of antibiotic, or you can go over to the well and find out what in the hell is going on in the well." And I think sometimes when it comes to our studies of issues and the phenomena that plagues a lot of our inner cities and some of our at-risk youth, sometimes we as scholars, we can get involved in debates and from one issue to another and kind of be consumed with a lot of information and results and best practices and never really get a chance to address the core cause of what's happening with our youth. So in this particular presentation, I like to talk about an issue that I believe will really shed some light on some of the core causes that many of our at-risk youth face in inner city schools. I'd like to begin with a little background concerning the research topic. Um, in a 1997 study completed by the Center for Disease Control Kaiser Permanente Research Group, they used over 17,000 participants, and this is what they determined. Quote, "There is a strong graded relationship between the breadth of exposure to abuse or household dysfunction during childhood and multiple risk factors for several of the leading causes of death in adults." What they're saying is that when they looked at adults who were suffering from some chronic illnesses of cancer, heart disease, even diabetes, what they noticed was when they looked back at their childhood, they could determine that there was some trauma, what they call adverse childhood experiences. The acronym is ACE. Those adults who now was showing signs of heart failure, cancer, and diabetes, they also noticed that they had a 20-year less life expectancy. It was all tied to the adverse childhood experiences that they had in their childhood. Look, one of the things they talked about here, they used 7 categories in order to identify what qualified as an adverse childhood experience: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness in the home, suicidal death, or someone in the family was actually incarcerated. Now, the question that comes to mind here that motivates the whole concept of the research is this: if exposure to childhood trauma has such dire implications for health later in life, what kind of effects were these experiences having on students right now? A critical example in the literature was this: Blacks and Hispanics had higher risks of childhood maltreatment, chiefly witnessing domestic violence. This includes actions of physical, mental, or sexual abuse. In other words, populations of Black and brown people, because of some of the disparities in which they are enduring, have a greater tendency to be in places and environments where these type of adverse childhood experiences might occur. Also, the same article responded that 80% of inner city youth ages 18 or younger in the US report experiencing one or more traumatic events, such as living with a violent or addicted adults, lacking food, or being physically or sexually assaulted. And 1 of 10 children under the age of 6 living in a major American inner city reports witnessing a shooting or a stabbing. Now, it's one interesting component of the literature comes from Dr. Joy DeGray. Dr. Joy DeGray has done a lot of work in the area of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Now, what Dr. May is trying to get us to understand in her book is that she attempts to link much of the post-traumatic behaviors within the African American community to the massively traumatic experiences of slavery. The author suggests that the horrific events of slavery have been conveyed from generation to generation of African Americans, perpetrated through systematic racism and negative assimilation and learned self-hatred. So what she is implying in her research and in her literature and in her books and of course in her lectures and teaching is that the impact of slavery has caused traumatic stress, and that has been passed on from generation to generation, perpetrated by self-hatred, assimilated in our behavior, and even in our aggressiveness towards one another. In a sense, then, those African American students in our classroom may quite well be suffering from post-traumatic stress, not only from their current environment, but attitudes, behaviors, and paradigms passed on because of the slavery component of the syndrome that Dr. DeGray is mentioning. Let's begin by taking a look at the research in terms of the purpose, the research questions, the rationale, and let's say the benefits of the actual research proposal in its entirety. Well, let's talk about the research purpose. Now, the initial focus of the ACE study, this adverse childhood experience study, involved the impact of childhood trauma on the health of adult survivors. Research focusing on the impact of ACE on child survivors and its impact on the academic performance is extremely sparse. This research seeks to determine how ACE affected the academic performance of African American adults currently seeking their GED during their elementary or junior high school experiences. Now, here's some questions. How did adverse childhood experiences contribute to African American students from inner cities dropping out of school? Let me pause for a moment and say the focus group we're looking at are individuals who are currently seeking their GED or have received a GED for the last 24 months. The concept is that we believe that individuals often who drop out of school and pursue GEDs, many of them are probably doing so because of some traumatic event that made them unsuccessful in the current dynamics of the school system. So we want to look at African American students and how the adverse childhood experiences contribute to African American students from inner cities dropping out of school. Other question is, what presenting symptoms of adverse childhood experiences do adult African American GED recipients who grew up in inner cities report experiencing? Finally, how did adverse childhood experiences impact the social educational experiences in elementary and or junior high school experiences? Now, let's take a look at the rationale. Although the exposure to and effects of chronic trauma in children from low-income urban environments have been labeled a public health concern, there is still limited treatment effectiveness or practice research available to guide the delivery of services to this highly impacted, underserved population. All right. So the rationale is there's very little to any literature or research out there that takes a look at the impact of adverse childhood experiences while the child is still in elementary or junior high. And there's little research and little effort being made to formulate practices, theories, and other concepts to address this dire circumstance. Now, what are some of the benefits of this particular research model? Well, one is we can improve the theoretical paradigms. The research will contribute to the extension of previous causation theory and serve to refine the theoretical propositions by focusing on childhood issues of ACE and how peritraumatic distress, negative assimilations, and the resulting saliqua may contribute to the poor academic performances and other factors of African American students resulting in dropping out of school. Furthermore, another benefit, it can improve current policies. What does this really mean? Well, it means that we can provide innovative applications for this study that will contribute to overcoming problems and deficiencies innate in current policies that serve to address the exhibited symptoms of poor academic achievement rather than addressing the actual contributing source causation factors, adverse childhood experiences, for instance, and diminishing academic achievement among many elementary age African American students. So one of the benefits, again, is to look at the policies that we use to address these issues, the symptoms, and look at the causations that ACE may actually be contributing. Finally, improve current practices, foster improvement of both theory and policies that will serve to address current practices and spawn asserted actions that can be used to improve the social psychological development of elementary age African American students facing ACE issues. Take a moment to look at the components of the research that address framework and methodology. All right, let's take a look at the theoretical framework. Now, this approach will blend mixed methods for qualitative data collection and quantitative data collection analysis to enhance the study's capacity to interpret more thoroughly any broader findings and to answer the study's overarching questions. Now, in terms of the methodology, keep in mind the research will use what I call a quasi-qualitative inductive approach. That means it's going to draw its paradigms from philosophies and constructivism, phenomenology, and symbolic interactionism of qualitative research, along with some aspects of quantitative inquiry. In general, this research will feature a type of mixed method approach with a preference towards qualitative inquiry and directed content analysis specifically. Now, let's take also to look at the concept of trustworthiness in the overall component of the research, and along with analysis as well. In the area of credibility, official documents will establish participants' GED status, and ACE category assessment results will ensure proper population has been chosen for the research. In terms of transferability and dependability, the demographic is conveniently accessible and research can be applied to a wider context, and with the in-depth content obtained, the research has strong reproductive potential. Conformability, the use of peer review and professional academic consultation will address the researcher's potential for bias and predispositions. Moving on, let's take a look at analysis, the type of analysis that will be utilized. One aspect is directed content analysis. Now, this procedure will be used to code and to categorize the response from all of the interviewees. Narrative analysis, this procedure will be used to analyze the content from written survey responses. Likewise, discourse analysis, this procedure will be used to categorize and interpret the social interaction content generated during focus group sessions. And as we look at data triangulation, this will provide a comprehensive way of showing a perspective of all three analysis methods. All right, take a look at a couple more here. We also are looking at using grounded theory as one of the methods. This procedure will investigate similar examples and perspectives among similar settings, literature, and participants, and will be using the data to explain why certain phenomena happened. This would substantiate or confirm the findings of the study. Finally, illumination. This procedure will help to identify categories, themes, and patterns of phenomena within the daddy. Now, information and conclusion. Take a look at this. Now, the 1997 A study found a strong rated relationship between the breadth of exposure to abuse or household dysfunction during childhood and the presence of multiple health risk factors for several of the leading causes of death in adults. Current research and the statistics point to an ever widening academic achievement gap between African Americans and their white counterparts in America. This research will seek to determine how such factors may contribute to low academic achievement and other psychological issues among African American elementary age students within inner cities that contribute to their dropout rate. Thank you. I look forward to hearing your feedback.